Hi, everyone. Rosanna Berardi, the managing partner of Berardi Immigration Law. Thank you for joining our monthly Tuesday Trump updates. We like to do these webinars every Tuesday, once a month, just to let you know the latest and greatest. There's lots going on, and I thank you for joining us today. We'll get started in just a minute. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. This is the Trump 2.0 Tuesday webinar update with me, Rosanna Berardi, managing partner of Berardi Immigration Law here in Buffalo, New York. We'll get started in just a minute. Okay, it's 12 noon. Thanks for joining today. Again, Rosanna Berardi from Berardi Immigration Law. Our office is at the US-Canadian border in Buffalo, New York. I'm the managing partner here at the firm, and we are making it our business to keep everybody informed on the latest and greatest of US immigration law. So there's a few things happening right now that have been in the news, and I'd like to explain to you how they really work and the story behind the story. So the first big story last week was the Real ID requirements. What's Real ID? Well, actually, after 9/11, do you remember how long ago that was? The federal government decided that they really needed to clamp down on domestic travel and wanted to have all domestic travelers have documentation that showed where they lived and had some security features in it. So they kicked the can down the road for many, many, many years. And finally, May 7th, 2025, which was just last week, they actually put this into effect. So if you travel domestically at any airport, you need to have Real ID compliant documentation. What is that? Okay, there's a huge laundry list, most of which don't apply to the common traveler. So the big ones: a US passport, US green card, a Nexus card, and any type of ID that is either enhanced or Real ID compliant. So here in New York State, how do you know if your driver's license works? Well, either at the top it says New York, and then it'll say under it enhanced, or it will also have a little star in the top right corner. You need to have this type of documentation. If you're not sure if your ID is compliant, send it to me. Send it to me at rberardi@usmlawyer.com or through the contact us form on our website. Happy to take a look and let you know if it's compliant. So what if you don't have it? So, okay, they put this into effect May 7th-ish. So what's happening at the airports is if you don't have this compliant documentation, TSA will pull you aside and look you up in their computer system and most likely let you go. But why do that? The airports are chaos right now between TSA pre-check and all the things, God, do not go through Newark, power outages and air traffic control issues. Get this documentation. It's really good to have. Everybody should have a passport. If you live at the US-Canadian border like I do, the Nexus card, good for 5 years, $120. Can't beat that. Allows you to get TSA pre-check as well. Have the right documentation. We live in a world of security. You can't go anywhere or do anything without your ID. Have you tried to buy Sudafed at your local pharmacy? Guess what? You need your ID. Have you walked into Disney World lately? They take your fingerprint. This is the world we live in. So get on board. It's not a big deal. Everyone's complaining about it. The government has pushed this back for years and years and years, plenty of time to comply. So Real ID, the government has implemented it. We haven't heard of any terrible stories where our clients have not been able to travel, but make it easy. It's your job. Make it easy for these folks at TSA. Can you imagine dealing with the general public all day, every day? And then add this layer. So make it your job, make it easy for them to determine that you have the right documents to enter the United States. So that's Real ID. We have lots of blogs on this. I did a LinkedIn post on it last week with a video, got almost 1 million impressions. Whoa, people really want to know about this. And if you have any questions, just reach out. Happy to clarify that. So what else is happening? This is shocking. If any of you have followed me or listened to any of my interviews, I'm always complaining. Where is Congress? Congress, where are you? We shouldn't be governed by executive order. Guess what? 2 members of Congress, bipartisan, both parties, look at that cooperation, have proposed a new bill called the Canadian Snowbird Act. It's bipartisan. It's been proposed. And what will it do? So snowbirds typically can stay up to the United States for a period of 6 months. Now, this is not just limited to snowbirds. Basically, under the visitor category to the United States, if you're coming in to do something like vacation or, snowbird, the law says you can stay up to 6 months. I'm sorry. But really, Customs and Border Protection has the discretion to limit that. Nonetheless, Canadian Snowbird Act proposed to change that 6 months to 8 months. So an additional 2 months added. Why this? Why now? Well, let's look back at U.S.-Canadian relations since January. A little bit dicey, a little bit strained between the tariffs, the fingerprint requirement, the 51st state comments. Things aren't feeling that great between the U.S. and Canada. Now, we're still bringing in lots and lots of Canadians into the U.S. each and every day. But nonetheless, I think this was an olive branch extended by Congress saying, if you're at least 50 years old and you own or lease property in the United States, the law will let you stay up to 8 months. You've got to have a home in the U.S. and Canada. So the classic example would be, let's say you're 70 years old, you're retired, you live in Etobicoke, you've got a condo there, and you also have a condo in Hollywood Beach, Florida, where you love to stay for most of the winter. You'd be able to come in for up to 8 months. And this proposal says you would not be taxed as a resident from the United States perspective. Now, what does that mean? Typically, the tax rule, and I'm no tax lawyer, but the tax rules say if you're in the U.S. the majority of the year, you have to pay taxes as a resident. Now, this says you would not have to, and it would be non-resident status. Will this pass? We're not sure, but it was introduced at the end of April, has bipartisan support, is moving through the process. Lawmakers, business groups, they really like this. They feel like it's a great economic benefit, but we've seen this before and it hasn't passed. So we're going to keep this one on our radar screen. It's meant to provide some flexibility for retirees, seasonal residents, boost U.S. economies. We love snowbirds in the U.S. During the winter, there's up to 1 million of them. Think about that impact in states like Florida and Arizona. So it's still under congressional review. What I want to point out here, and this is very nuanced, okay? I don't want to give you a headache during your lunch hour. This is very nuanced. The Canadian Snowbird Act, in the law, if this is proposed, changes the stay from 6 months to 8 months. But guess who determines that period of stay? The folks at the border. So if you're flying in and you're driving in, you're essentially knocking on the door of the United States. Customs and Border Protection says, hey, Joe, where are you going? And if Joe is 70 years old and has a place in Etobicoke and is going to Hollywood Beach in Florida, chances are they're going to say, have a nice day. They're not going to give him anything. And the assumption and the presumption is he can stay up to 8 months if this passes. Now, let's change the scenario. Let's say Joe is 50 years old. He's unemployed. He lives with his parents in Etobicoke, doesn't have a job in Canada, and he wants to stay 6 months, and he's, staying with friends and family and couch surfing. When the government talks to him, when he knocks at the border, Customs and Border Protection is not going to say, have a nice day, Joe, stay up to 8 months. They're going to say, Joe, this is kind of risky. You don't have a job in Canada. You don't have a house in Canada. You can't work in the United States, and you're couch surfing. We don't like this. They can technically limit his period of admission to a week, 2 weeks, whatever they want. So just know, if this does pass, the maximum period of time changes to 8 months. But Customs and Border Protection, upon knocking on the U.S.-Canadian border door, always has the last say. Always will be able to determine how long an individual can remain in the United States. So I think this is an olive branch. I don't think there's any huge problems with it. My concern for our Canadian clients, because we hear this over and over again, if you're out of Canada for more than 6 months, it appears to impact your insurance coverage, which is your OHIP. Again, this is not my expertise. I'm a U.S. immigration lawyer, but I wanted to alert you to this fact as well. So again, Canadian Snowbird Act proposed. We're going to watch this closely as it moves through Congress and keep you up to date. So, big week for U.S. immigration and the United States Supreme Court. Yikes. We've got a big case being heard on the 15th, which is Thursday. The United States Supreme Court granted a request for an emergency review of birthright citizenship. So let's unwind this a little bit. So birthright citizenship, the concept is, if you're born in the United States, you're a citizen. When I was trained at the border a million years ago, and I worked as an immigration inspector, we were told a concept of jus soli, meaning if you are born on the soil of the United States, you are a U.S. citizen. This is well established under the law. The 14th Amendment says it, but there's some wording that the lawyers are getting really technical about. Well, the minute President Trump was inaugurated in January of this year, he said, no, the founding fathers did not intend for people without status that have children in the United States to allow those children to be U.S. citizens. This is the concept of birthright citizenship. So check out his pen, signed an order saying no birthright citizenship. We don't like this. We think that there's some words in the 14th Amendment, subject to the jurisdiction thereof, I'll spare you the details, that will really not support this interpretation, even though we've got lots and lots of case law. It was immediately appealed, went to some lower federal courts who blocked it and said, nope, we don't like this. Well, guess what? Instead of arguing on the merits of the birthright citizenship, what the Trump administration said, hey, we're going to pivot here. All these lower courts issued an injunction, and an injunction means if a federal court judge signs an injunction, it means that the law is no longer, not the law, the executive order is no longer valid and in place in the United States. Think about that. Federal district court has a power to freeze an executive order. We've got the executive branch and we've got the judicial branch kind of fighting it out. Who has rank and authority to do this? The Trump administration lawyers said, whoa, this is insane. Everything that we're proposing through executive order is being stopped dead in its tracks by the lower courts. It's not fair. The lower courts should not shape public policy and rules. So what is the major issue here? What's the fight that the Supreme Court said, hey, this is huge. We need to hear this immediately. The fight is about the impact of these injunctions. So the Trump administration signs an executive order that seems unconstitutional. It gets appealed, goes to federal district courts. Judges are like, nope, unconstitutional, signs an injunction over and over and over again. So what happens? We are going to hear a showdown, not on birthright citizenship. Nope. I'm going to watch these arguments closely on C-SPAN on Thursday. I can't wait. We're going to hear about the balance of power between the executive branch and the courts, the judiciary. This will have sweeping impact. This is a major constitutional issue on the impact of injunctions. So are the justices going to decide on birthright citizenship? Probably not. They're going to decide on a legal nuance. But watch this one closely. This is a big issue in U.S. Supreme Court law, immigration law, power of injunctions. We are going to see what the Supreme Court has to say on the scope of these nationwide injunctions. Should they be able to supersede an executive order? Time will tell. But May 15th is the day that this is going to happen. There will be oral arguments before the court. And then the court usually wraps up their session end of June, beginning of July. So we will have a decision very soon. Highly unusual for the Supreme Court to hear something like this as an emergency appeal. It shows the importance of this issue in the United States. So that is Trump and the Supreme Court. What else is happening? Well, recently in the last few weeks, thankfully, things have quieted down for the international students in the United States. Boy, around the beginning to middle of April, students in the United States who have been here for years and years were getting notices. Their status was terminated for minor infractions of the law, speeding tickets, a headlight out. They were told, pack it up and go home. Thank God. Attorneys started challenging some of these terminations, and the government was losing badly, and finally rolled this policy back and said, okay, international students, we were too aggressive here. Everyone can stay. We are going to be looking closely, but we're going to look closely more accurately and not go after these minor violations. So it's good news for students. So if you are an international student and you do have plans to travel, I would definitely make sure someone looks at your documentation to make sure you don't have difficulty reentering. But in terms of that termination issue and problem, that seems to have gone away, thankfully. So 3 big issues. We have the Real ID Act in effect, get your documents in order. We have the proposed Canadian Snowbird Act getting a lot of media attention. We'll see how that goes through Congress. We've got the showdown between the Trump administration and the Supreme Court in terms of the scope of nationwide injunctions. That's happening on Thursday, the 15th. And we also have international students. The policy seems to have subsided and all seems well. So what else is happening? Well, I've been working on this one for a while. I'd like to introduce and announce, you'll see the friendly QR code, the Berardi Immigration Law Immigration Podcast. It's called Immigration Weekly by Rosanna Berardi. Every week, I'm going to be recording that episode. Short and sweet, just like me. I don't have time for an hour podcast. Who does? My episode's about 15, 20 minutes, perfect for when you're drying your hair, putting your makeup on, driving to work. You will understand how this all works. Believe me, the stories that the media are telling, I don't care, conservative, liberal, Canadian, US, full of hyperbole, full of half-truths. It makes me nuts. I'm on media all the time, and I'm always trying to explain how it works. We are going to break down really how these immigration concepts work. So scan our QR code. It'll take you to our website that has the podcast page. You could also download Immigration Weekly Podcast on any place you hear podcasts, like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. It's all there. There's 3 episodes up. You're going to love it. You're going to hear my background story. You're going to hear about search and seizure. Can the government look at your phones? Short answer, yes. Be careful what's on them. They've always been able to do this since the sands of time. And then I do have an episode about this birthright citizenship issue. So tune in, share with your friends. You'll be the smartest person at your dinner table. When you see some crazy headline about immigration, you'll say, I listened to that Immigration Weekly podcast with Rosanna Berardi. That's really not what's happening. So, boom, 20 minutes in and out. Go grab a sandwich. Thank you for joining us. You guys, this stuff is moving fast and furiously. We are constantly creating videos and content and webinars. You can't afford to not know what's happening at the border. And we are committed to bringing you the educational truth. We try to be bipartisan. We love both parties. We try and talk right down the middle of the issues without the political spin. Thank you for joining me today. If you have any questions, please drop them in the chat. Happy to answer them. Be sure to follow our podcast. Be sure to follow us on LinkedIn. We always have great info. And I thank you for being here today.